Hey, it's Phil Meyer. Let's talk about Bard on controller. Many of you have asked for a Bard setup, and I wanted to make sure I had at least one physical ranged DPS job layout ready before Evercold. My DPS controller layouts focus on optimizing core instant use global cooldown abilities on the controller face buttons, so I can better maintain character movement while working through my attack rotation. Similar to my other layouts, my approach to Bard is to split its core actions into two cross hotbar sets. The first set is for single target attacks, and the second focuses on area attacks. I quickly swap between these two sets by tapping the right shoulder button. If you're new to set switching, check out my general controller framework video after this one. There's a link in the description. Now, Bard has a lot going on and is sure to keep your fingers busy. It has two main global cooldown attacks per target focus, single target or AoE, and a slew of additional off-global attacks and party buffs. Some of those morph into even more attacks once activated. Let's walk through the ability placements, starting with the base hotbar's right trigger, and then as usual I'll give you a demo of the layout in action. On the single target bar, Burst Shot and Refulgent Arrow take two of the face buttons. These are Bard's core single target attacks. On the AoE bar, they get swapped for their area attack counterparts, Layden's Bite and Shadow Bite. A Bard will use all four of these attacks frequently, so they get these high value buttons. The other two face buttons in this cluster go to Bard's off-global attacks with the shortest recast times, meaning they'll be used almost as frequently. These are Imperial Arrow and Rain of Death on the AoE bar, which is replaced with Heartbreak Shot, Rain of Death's single target equivalent, on the single target bar. Having these four actions clustered together gives Bard significant mobility while rapidly weaving off-global strikes between its main attacks. We'll come back to the D-pad placements in a moment, but first let's focus on the left trigger's face buttons. This is where I've placed Bard's damage over time abilities. Caustic Bite, Storm Bite, and Iron Jaws take three of those buttons, and they remain the same on both the single target and AoE sets. I debated swapping these out for other actions on the AoE set, but I felt the alternatives didn't really do much more for me. There are also situations where it can be advantageous to drop dots on one or two enemies while weaving in Rain of Death on the group as a whole, so I think this arrangement works best. The fourth face button goes to Apex Arrow, which is another global cooldown attack powered by Bard's Soul Voice gauge after level 80. After level 86, it morphs into Blast Arrow following the first activation, making this button cover two global cooldown attacks in sequence. I chose to keep this on the base hotbar so that off-global attacks could be more easily weaved in between those two actions. Speaking of off-globals, the base hotbar's D-pad clusters are home to more of Bard's off-global support abilities. Sidewinder takes a spot on the left trigger D-pad because it has a longer cooldown than the off-globals on the right trigger. Since the dot attacks are also used less frequently, it makes sense to group them together. Repelling Shot is Bard's gap opener, and I've placed it on the bottom D-pad button, which matches the gap opener placements on my other job layouts. The Warden's Paean can remove or prevent detrimental effects on a party member, so I've given it the same slot I use for Asuna on my healer layouts for muscle memory. I typically target a party member with a D-pad to use it, just like Asuna, so an easy to reach D-pad slot feels right. Raging Strikes takes the last slot on this trigger. It has a notable recast time and really just needs to be placed somewhere accessible between global cooldown attacks. This spot works fine. The right trigger's D-pad is where I've placed two of Bard's ranged DPS roll actions, Head Graze and Leg Graze. I plan to use these same slots on my other ranged DPS job layouts as well. Head Graze takes the same spot as Interject on my tank layouts. They do the same thing, canceling a target's interruptible action. Keeping Head Graze here maintains quick access and muscle memory. Leg Graze can slow a target's movement, which helps keep them at a distance, exactly what every ranged job wants. Keeping it here makes it easier to weave in between primary attacks. Barrage takes the left button. It grants an instant activation of Refulgent Arrow or Shadow Bite, so keeping it on the same trigger as those actions just makes sense. At higher levels, it morphs into the single-use global cooldown attack Resonant Arrow. Instantly used global cooldowns aren't ideal on D-pad buttons, but since it can't be used all that frequently, it's not a huge concern, especially since we need those face buttons for more frequently used actions. The final D-pad slot goes to Pitch Perfect. Experienced bards will know that one of Bard's song actions, the Wanderer's Minuet, morphs into Pitch Perfect after activation, but Pitch Perfect can still be slotted in independently. Pitch Perfect is an off-global attack that ideally should be weaved in between global cooldown attacks, which is why I want it on this trigger. Using both hands across the D-pad and face buttons for this string of attacks feels great. It's efficient and just really fun. You could choose to slot the Wanderer's Minuet here directly instead, but I keep them separate so I don't accidentally activate the song while my fingers are on autopilot. I keep all three of Bard's song abilities grouped together on the double-cross hotbar, specifically on face buttons to keep them accessible while repositioning. They have notable recast times, so the double-cross hotbar feels appropriate. The song actions are ordered the same way their matching codas are displayed on the song gauge, Mage's Ballad on top and Wanderer's Minuet on the bottom, so I can more easily match them up at a glance. On the same cluster as the song actions is Radiant Finale, an off-global support action powered by those song codas. It's not used as frequently as Bard's other actions, so the double-cross hotbar makes sense. Keeping it next to the song actions also makes it easier to activate right after starting a song, which keeps that combo fluid. At level 100, Radiant Finale will morph into Radiant Encore, yet another instant use global cooldown attack, which reinforces the choice to put this on a face button. Arm's Length takes the same D-pad slot I dedicate to it across all my job layouts for muscle memory. Let's wrap up with the double-cross hotbar's left trigger. Second Wind takes one of the face buttons, matching my other DPS layouts and keeping it usable while in motion. Nature's Minna is placed right next to it so they can be used together easily. Troubadour grants a damage reduction buff for the entire party and takes the bottom face button, keeping it accessible while moving and consistent with similar skills on my other job layouts. Battle Voice takes the right face button. Its 2-minute recast time means you won't be using it all that often, which is why it lives on the double cross hotbar. That said, keeping it on a face button makes it smoother to use when you're charging into an encounter. The ranged DPS roll action, Foot Graze, takes one of the D-pad slots. It works similarly to Sleep or Repose for casters, temporarily disabling an enemy's movement. Since the effect cancels when that enemy is attacked, it's really only useful in more specific circumstances, which is why it doesn't need to be grouped with the attack actions. So that covers the core of my Bard layout, designed to feel fluid and mobile on a standard controller. We're not totally done yet though. The extended cross hotbar is an important part of this setup, just like with my other job layouts. One half of the extended cross hotbar is where I put less frequently used but still important combat actions. Limit Break, Focus Targeting, and Target Lock-On take their usual spots, which should be familiar if you've seen any of my other recent videos. For Bard and the other ranged DPS jobs, I've placed Peloton on a free face button here. Since it speeds up the entire party's movement, it really should be on a face button for easy access. Now, I can already hear some of you reaching for your keyboards, ready to tell me that it can be macroed with Sprint. Yes, I know, but I don't agree with that approach. Put those keyboards down for a second and I'll explain why. L3 is where I put Sprint by way of macro 98, and assist targeting goes on R3 via macro 99. These are common across all my job layouts. Check out my general controller framework video if you need a primer on setting those up. I know some players prefer to overload their Sprint macro with Peloton or mount actions, and I'll always tell you to set things up in whatever way works best for you. But combining Sprint and Peloton trades granular control for convenience. There are plenty of times when I want to use Peloton for a speed buff while keeping Sprint available for combat. Macroing them together takes that choice away. No judgment if you still want to combine them. As I always say in these videos, you do you. Alright, you can grab those keyboards again, I won't stop you. Before I wrap up, I'll run through a quick rotation demo. My usual disclaimer applies. The goal is to show the general flow of the layout, and not to optimize for perfect DPS. I hope this video helped you, and if it did, doing all the typical YouTube stuff is always appreciated. Thanks for watching. Your feedback on these videos really does keep me motivated. See you in the next one.